Let us start off the session by chanting Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. We are to finish the last part of the Sabbāsava Sutta today. We are going to be discussing or finishing the part on the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment is a section that we have come across earlier in our Dhamma study. So the 7 factors of enlightenment, we've heard about it. I think we have so many desanas about the same topic as well. And in the earlier parts of the Sabbāsava Sutta, we have gone through the different elements of getting rid of these influxes that arise, right? And the 7 factors of enlightenment is only possible if those parts are fulfilled, right? It is only possible, bhavanamaya patabba is, or that those influxes that can be got rid of through development of bhavana, right, which is the Satta Bodhanga or the 7 factors of enlightenment, is only possible if we are able to follow through the earlier parts of the Sabbāsava Sutta. So just to, before we move on, just to recollect on what those earlier parts are, we have the influxes that were to be abandoned by seeing, right? Dasanena Parthabhatam, asava, right? And then we have the hindrances or the influxes that are to be got rid of, abandoned by restraint. Then we have the influxes that are to be abandoned by reflective use. Then we have the influxes to be abandoned by endurance or by enduring them. Then we have the influxes to be abandoned by avoidance. And then we have the influxes to be abandoned by removal. And at last, we have those influxes which are to be abandoned by cultivation, bhavana, right? By bhavana. Let us read that part and finish it off first. And what bhikkhus are the influxes? Page number 55. And what bhikkhus are the influxes to be abandoned by cultivation? Here, bhikkhus, the word cultivation comes because bhavana, we know that the root bhav means develop, right? So the word is then, it has been translated here as cultivation. And what bhikkhus are the influxes to be abandoned by cultivation? Dependent on solitude, dependent on fading away of lust, dispassion, dependent on cessation, ripening, letting go, wisely reflecting, he cultivates awakening factor. Sorry, I missed one. Here, bhikkhus, a monk wisely reflecting cultivates the awakening factor of mindfulness. Wisely dependent on solitude, depending on fading away of lust, dispassion, dependent on cessation, ripening in the letting go. The second one is awakening factor of Dhamma investigation. The third, the awakening factor of effort. The fourth, the awakening factor of zest. Fifth, the awakening factor of tranquility. Sixth, the awakening factor of concentration. Seven, wisely reflecting, he cultivates the awakening factor of equanimity. Conclusion. Bhikkhus, while influxes, vexation, and fever may arise in one who does not cultivate such things, Even so, there are no influxes, vexation, or fear in one who cultivates them. These bhikkhus are the influxes that are to be abandoned by cultivation. Conclusion. Bhikkhus, insofar as a monk has abandoned by seeing those influxes that should be abandoned by seeing, has abandoned by restraint those influxes that should be abandoned by restraint, has abandoned by reflective using those influxes that should be abandoned by reflective using, has abandoned has abandoned by endurance those influxes that should be abandoned by endurance, has abandoned by avoidance those influxes that should be abandoned by avoidance, has abandoned by removal those influxes that should be abandoned by removal, has abandoned by cultivation those influxes that should be abandoned by cultivation. This then, bhikkhus, is called a monk who dwells restrained in restraint of all influxes. He has cut off craving, broken free from the fetter, and with complete penetration of conceit, he has made an end of suffering. The Blessed One said, this the monks approved of the Blessed One's word with a joyful heart, right? With a joyful heart. So, the first part. And what bhikkhus are the influxes? Here bhikkhus, a monk wisely reflecting, cultivates a awakening factor of mindfulness. Now, mindfulness here is referring to the satipatthana, right? The satipatthana, the four parts of the satipatthana. The cultivation of the satipatthana is made possible by the rest of the ways of restraint or abandonment of influxes which supports the practice of the satipatthana, right? Which supports the practice of the satipatthana. So now one may say, okay, Bhante, do we have to have that amount of restraint to start practice? To start practicing satipatthana? No, you don't have to. Right? Even a killer, a murderer, a impure person of any caliber can start or can, if one wants, practice a satipatthana, right? However, for the part of the satipatthana to now reap or to bear fruit, for that to happen, there must be the abandonment of the influxes must happen to a certain extent, right? Without which the satipatthana, this is not because of anything miraculous. The reason why the satipatthanas will not then flourish is because the influxes will attack. The influxes will burden. The influxes will disturb that arising of the kusala or will hinder the progressing of the factors of enlightenment or those that lead to enlightenment. The unwholesome factors will arise, right? It will start appearing in your mind, right? Because why? Remember that the quality of akusala, unwholesome, is to weaken. Anything in your life which gives you strength, akusala will weaken, right? Akusala will weaken. Now, don't think that this is only for meditation. No. For one who bears akusala, the relationships are weak. For one who bears akusala, the whatever in life that gives one strength, courage, now those become rather fragile, right? Rather fragile, right? Now, when we talk about this fragility, some might say, well, that doesn't appear so. People who do bad still seem to be doing okay, right? They might seem to be doing okay, but it only takes very little for their lives to come crumbling down, right? How many things are there to hide? How relationships hanging from strings, right? It is a very fragile place to be in because of the akusala. Because akusala, it works in sort of puncturing through and sort of spreading the virus of these roots of akusala into each and everything in a person's life. For example, we spoke about vichikicha and restlessness, uddacha. Vichikicha, skeptical doubt, is classed as one of the worst hindrances that there is. It's actually the worst. There is no hindrance which is said to be far worse than vichikicha. Why? Because vichikicha, like a vine of a tree which eats into a stone, concrete, everything, it goes into and sort of its roots go deep into everything with a foundation in your life and creates a doubt in everything. There was this very intelligent monk. He was very intelligent. He was very young, younger than I am, right? About 2 years, 3 years younger. He was 3 years younger, but absolutely he was prodigious. He was prodigious, right? I remember him when he first came to Burma from Sri Lanka. He was a Sri Lankan young monk. Um, he learned the Burmese language within a year. And within this year, he also managed to write Burmese sort of examinations. And after writing these Burmese examinations, he was able to come first in the whole area and then the whole state in Burma, right? He was that prodigious. And if he is to memorize 15 pages out of a book, he can memorize that same amount the next day. He's easily much more intelligent than reverend monks like even Venerable Aridama Mahatero, right? Not wise, but very intelligent, right? He's that prodigious. And when you're too smart, when you're too smart, also things go wrong. We know that all too well. Right? So this monk, he's such a sweet. I mean, he's not a person who has a big mania or anything like that, but he knows he's intelligent, and because he knows he's intelligent, he also believes what he thinks, right? But he doesn't push it out, not in a very ugly way. It is only to him. He's a very sweet man, sweet monk. So he, one day, on his excavation and analysis of Dhamma, which is learning of Dhamma, he developed a doubt regarding the Sarvajñata Jnana, the omniscient knowledge of the Buddha, right? Now, I remember this was eating at him. Why? Because this doubt that he had, with the enormous amount of knowledge that he had as well, everything that he knew, everything that he learned, this doubt was eating at everything, right? Meaning, right, this doubt was spreading into, he found, whilst he didn't want to, the mind automatically used that doubt and sort of it spread within the other things that he knew as well, right? So this question mark on the Buddha, whether the Buddha was really omniscient, whether the Buddha actually knew everything, right? And this, he could not continue his studies. He could not focus on his studies, because the more that he focused on his studies, the more this doubt would be sort of going through his mind. And he knew that it was wrong. He knew that it was incorrect. However, the doubt was just spreading and spreading. And of course, him knowing that doubt is one of the most looked down upon hindrances, or one of those hindrances mentioned by the Buddha, he was afraid. So I remember him moving in with us for a couple of days and sort of discussing and sort of being with friends and sort of discussing and trying to sort of get rid of this. And it took him about a month or so to really sort of, to sort of get rid of that and put it aside, right? So the hindrances, whatever stability that one would have, even within the Dhamma, it crushes it. That is what it does. right? That is its task. By crushing it, what happens is the mundane world becomes a superpower in your life, or the predominant ruling in your life. It is to go against that flow that we have these enlightenment factors, because the enlightenment factors are those which give you that ability of strength, right? And for that to flourish, we need to have the support of the rest of the earlier factors mentioned in the Sabbāsava Sutta. Right? It is with those that support, the those factors support the flourishing of the Satipatthana. Now, the flourishing of the Satipatthana, right, is what we here refer to as mindfulness. Now, in when mindfulness arises, this here specifically, right? This here specifically, it can be the states, it can be in certain suttas which concern the Sapta Bodhanga, the 7 factors of enlightenment, or even the 36 factors, the limbs of awakening, right? In all of these, mindfulness is the key. Even in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha's last admonition before he passes away is to be heedful. This heedfulness bases the primary structure which allows for further penetrative wisdom to arise. Why? Because it is mindfulness which allows for the mind to now not be based off, or not to work off of, the hindrances, the asavas, the fetters, the influxes. Without the mindfulness element being predominant in your system, we are always going to fall prey to the hindrances and the influxes, because of the promptitude from the outside elements, through the sense basis, through attachment, because that is what our primary nature is, to be. How do we be, or how are we being at this moment? It is the attachment that we have to the 5 aggregates of clinging. The 5 aggregates of clinging, that attachment is wholly based on tanha and avijja, greed and ignorance. That is promoted by the influxes, the anusayas, which keeps on telling us that without this connection, we are no more. Right? That we are no more. That whole connection, that is why the fear of, or the fear that arises during the time of progressing in vipassana arises because of that sort of fear that arises into non-being. Because we are taught, or we see being as the attachment that we have towards, or how that result of that attachment is to the 5 aggregates of clinging. And it is a result. The result of the 5 aggregates of clinging is what we see as self, right? Not the 5 aggregates of clinging, the result of the 5 aggregates of clinging. That is very important, right? Because it is the result of the 5 aggregates of the clinging, which is the Vedana and the Sanya, the compilation of all of that. As a result of that, we see, Bhante, or, Dil, or Hemamali, or Mala, or Lettuce. That is the result of that attachment, right? And in letting go of or our minds even considering this letting go or divide into non-being, seems somewhat threatening, but in reality there is nothing to threat, however we perceive it as threat. But to see that part, the sati mindfulness, is what is important, right? Because without that state of awareness, we cannot penetrate into the next state. What is the next state? Dhamma Vichaya Sambodhanga. Now some people think Dhamma Vichaya, right? Dhammavicaya Sambojjhanga is sometimes assumed as this sort of internal kammatthana or internal meditation instructions or internal guidance that we receive, right? Now, that is a part first one must be cautioned about, right? Now, as you go on meditating, right, as you go on meditating, and when you're especially not living in a meditative atmosphere, right? Now we none of us are really living in a meditative atmosphere, are we? Right? You all are home, even me. We are no none of us are living in a meditative atmosphere, right? So what happens when we are not living in a now, for example, let's say you're the only person at home who meditates, or you're the only person who does it with that much sort of passion or severity, or with that sort of piousness. So what, in your view, what you are doing is the highest or is the most praiseworthy, right? Because I mean, we have taught ourselves that through Buddhism or the scriptures or whatever it is, we have taught ourselves that. So we assume that it is the most praiseworthy thing to be doing. Now, when we do this, right, and when we are not in a spiritual sort of meditating atmosphere, we also develop that sense of ego to say that what I am doing is somewhat, or not somewhat, but much more praiseworthy than the mundane affairs that my family is caught up in. You know, Buddhists often have this sort of Buddhists often have this sort of thing where even they sort of assume, sorry, where they sort of assume that being a Buddhist is the highest thing, and then people who would be of other religion or would not be of the Buddhist faith, they would sort of assume that they are poorly, right? That they are poorly, or that is something to be sad of. Now, that is a ego. That is a sense of ego. Now, with that sense of ego, some people, now this ego starts speaking to you, right? Now, when if someone says something bad to you or something of that sort, and that internal dialogue, that is that ego speaking to you, that ego starts now telling you what to do in your meditation, right? And people, and don't think that this is a subjective sort of thing. This happens a lot, and people think that this is their meditative satipatthana dhammavicaya, which is giving them their guidance, right? Which is giving them their guidance. And they start now listening to their ego, taking meditation instructions and behavioral instructions from the ego, right? From the ego. Now, that is not Dhammavicaya, right? That is not Dhammavicaya. I'm telling you this because there's a lot of people who believe that is Dhammavicaya. That is not Dhammavicaya. Dhammavicaya Sambojjhanga is, I have told you earlier, when a person attains to a state of enlightenment, that person has no doubt as to the state that that person is in. Just as now, if you are to walk up to your room, right, and you are standing in your room, you know as clear as day that this is my room. Just so, when you are in that place or attainment, you know for sure that this is the attainment that you are in, right? That confidence is only made possible because of the reduction, the suppression of the nivaranas or the influxes brought about by the earlier factor of enlightenment, which is mindfulness. Dhammavicaya Sambojjhanga, through Dhammavicaya Sambojjhanga, we spoke about the jhanas. We know when we come out of the jhana, we do a bit of investigation as to what state of jhana we were in, what state of mind we were in, a sort of a awareness process as to the position of the mind position of your ashravas or your influxes, right? That positioning, right, tells you now, as you are sort of, if you have a lot of things to get done, telling yourself, okay, I have 10 things to get done. I have now finished 3. I have this much more to get done. It is also a sense of motivation, isn't it? As you tick off everything that you have, or as you do it, you tick it off, it is a motivation for you to complete the whole thing. Similarly, Dhamma Vichaya becomes a motivator on its own that motivates one to keep on that journey, to keep on suppressing and to maintain that suppressing process of your practice with regards to the influxes, right? It is a state of seeing the position or seeing the hindrances that have been abandoned within the person, within the practitioner, right? Within the practitioner. Now, this Dhamma Vijaya, this investigation, the Buddha has taught to us. I've used his word many times, or even in the sense of Dhammadasa, right? We have spoken of this sort of awareness, this attentive awareness upon the position that we are in currently. It is the same reflective process of the Dhammadasa, but remember, the Dhamma Vichaya arises, that penetrative, keen intellect arises only through the suppression or the abandonment of the hindrances, right? Only through the suppression or the abandonment of the hindrances, When we are aware of the position that we are in our practice, we now become motivated to keep going with the practice, to keep it going. That motivation that we derive from the findings of the Dhamma Vichaya supports the next element, which is Virya Sambojjhanga, effort. Now, this Virya is also we can draw parallels with the Samma Virya of the Eightfold Noble Path, right? Of the Eightfold Noble Path. Now, remember that everything, the governing factor of all of these states is wisdom. Then what is wisdom? Wisdom specifically pertaining to enlightenment or conducive to enlightenment, namely the Four Noble Truths. That is the base support for all of this. Remember, if we think about the other earlier parts of the Sabbāsava Sutta, what happened was we were re-adverting or practicing or telling ourselves, or rather making visible, right, through practice, that same wisdom. Now here we are experiencing the fruits of that wisdom, right? Now, if we are to sort of go into the avoidance, for example, if we are to sort of look at the 4 parts, right? Now, the first part was influxes to be abandoned by seeing, right? Now, the seeing itself, what is seeing? How can you see? This is not just a seeing which is to be done by the eyes. This is the seeing to be done through the eye of wisdom, right? That prompts us towards now the inception of the correct wisdom to impart the knowledge or to practically see the parts of the Four Noble Truths, to turn our mind towards the Four Noble Truths. The arising or the deeper understanding of the Four Noble Truths started at this part of starting to now abandon the influxes by seeing. Right? The abandonment or the working towards that abandonment started the moment your eyes is like, oh, wow, this is what reality is, or this is what an ignorant person is, this is what a wise person does from your behavior. Right? This is what should be done, this is what should not be done. Right? That is our first inception into this practice, in terms of now blooming, or rather watering those plants of wisdom in our minds, in our hearts. Right? From that we see, if we go through, it goes deeper and deeper into each and every other part of our life. Right? From the things that we consume, to the ways that we behave, to the ways that we will, the things that we would experience when we are meditating, sitting down in meditation. Right? It goes deeper and deeper to a position where now we can practice the Satipatthana. So it is actually a grooming process. I mean, it's not nice to use that word grooming, but rather it is a process of grooming that wisdom to cultivate, to develop to an extent where now you will sit in meditation and do Satipatthana without any sort of shakable nature now disturbing you. Why? Because you have developed that wisdom aggregate there. So everything that we are studying in terms of Abhidhamma Samatha, Abhidhamma Sutra and Vinaya should be conducive to, or should be in every way conducive to, your further understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Right? That wisdom is then what motivates you to keep on practicing. Right? And it is at that state, the last part of this ashrava, the Sabbāsava Sutta, denotes where now we are now in that last bit of really experiencing the fruits of that practice. The fruits of that practice. Right? Now, the fruits of that practice. Then arises the virya, which is together with, or can be drawn parallels with the fact of the Samma Virya. Right? Now the Samma Virya that arises, this is the effort that we put in its four parts. Remember the four parts of the Samma Virya, right? To keep virya, the effort put in to not allow for unarisen, unwholesome to arise. The effort put in to get rid of, abandon the arisen, unwholesome. The effort put in to cultivate and develop already arisen, wholesome. And the effort put in to arouse unarisen, wholesome. Right? Unarisen, wholesome. That is the virya that we put into now, which becomes the awakening factor. The awakening factor here at this part, which now does something to us. It creates a mold by which, now that is now, when we become arahants, right? When we are enlightened beings will stick to or be behaving in mind and body accustomed to a certain pattern of livelihood. Right? To a certain pattern of livelihood. This livelihood that they would be in is governed by, of course, this effort that we are speaking of here. Right? That we are speaking of here. One thing that I'm going to go into at the end of the sutta is actually Samma Ajiva, because that is very much a part of this, right? But that I'll be coming to later on. This effort is then what they follow in each and every moment. This effort is something that they follow, but to such an extent that they don't need to be reminded of it. Right? They don't need to be reminded of it. Now, as properly mannered human beings with with a certain amount of etiquette, we know if we are to sort of um, if we are to take a shower, right, we will be taking shower in the bathroom, right? We will not be taking a shower in the middle of the hall, in the middle of the hall or in the kitchen. We'll be taking a shower in the bathroom, right? If we want to cook something, you'll be cooking in the kitchen, not in your bedroom, right? Not in your bedroom. Likewise, now how do we even think that? We don't. I mean, it's almost instantaneous. The moment you want a glass of water, the moment that you want a snack, the moment that you want to do anything with regards to food, you think of the kitchen, right? It is such a, well well sort of absorbed part of behavior. The virya that we maintain in Samma Virya also becomes similarly acquainted with and molded into us as a Arahant would now follow, or as an Arahant would now behave with or have effort with, right? That intention or that molding, or that actually not molding, but rather that sort of, because if we say molding, that is again Atma, not molding, but rather that passion towards that way of life is molded by this point of enlightenment, right? This factor of enlightenment that tells us what? That tells us and sort of affirms to us through practice that is the this is the better way to live, rather. Because we must be very careful, because in Buddhism, so if I'm telling you this so that you are aware, because I might make a mistake, right? In Buddhism, there is no feeding of views. There is no there is no push of one towards believing a certain thing, right? These points of Dhamma that we have are pointers, not forcefully established views, right? Because the moment that we forcefully establish a view, that goes down to Atma again. That is what then in one of those favorite sutras that we have, the what is that sutta? Do not follow something just because I tell you to follow it because
Kalama Sutra.
Kalama Sutra. Thank you, Miri. Thank you. The Kalama Sutra. Our favorite, that is the foundation of the Kalama Sutra. Right? There is no purpose for now that Kalama Sutra, we just take it from a standpoint of a missionary standpoint. But the Kalama Sutra goes far deeper than that. Because why? We should only be following that which we experientially know to be true. Because anything else becomes a ditti. Right? Anything else becomes a ditti. If you say, no, Bhankit, I don't think that's true. Just tell the Sri Lankans not to do a Bodhi Puja. My gosh. Right? They will eat my head. Right? How that comes about? Why? Because it is not wisdom bound. It is ditti bound. Right? Tell someone you don't need tell a Sri Lankan Buddhist you don't need a piritnula to be blessed. Right? Tell a Sri Lankan Buddhist you don't need to wear white to the temple. Done. The monk is out of business. Why is that? Because it is not panya based, it is not wisdom based, it is ditti based. Right? The moment the Kalama Sutra in that way instigates that nothing should be followed just because it is culture or tradition. Because why? Not because of anything else. It is because to stop the cultivation of wrong view, ditti, which is one of the influxes. Right? Which is one of the influxes. In Samma Virya, through the practice of putting into practice these 4 parts of Sammavirya, right effort, what we do is we realize, just as when you would cook and you would come across a right recipe and you know, this is the right way to do it. You know for sure why. You've made it, you've tasted also worse recipes or better recipes. So you know where this specific recipe stands. Right? You've traveled around, you've seen mountains in Sri Lanka, you've seen mountains in Europe, you've seen mountains in America, you've seen mountains everywhere. Now you know what is the best view. Why? Because you've seen mountains everywhere. So now you're able to compare. This is a practice-oriented approach. You're not supposed to follow for the sake of it being said by the Buddha, because again, the attachment towards the ditti, right? Attachment towards the ditti. Because if a view is caught hold of through tanha, then that is not going to be something which is now going to help you in your achievement of enlightenment. Right? Moving on. Now, when that due effort is put into the practice, right? When that due effort is put into the practice, now, because you experience that sense of happiness that one would experience with the practice, what happens? Now, one experiences that sense of gladness with the mind, right? The gladness of the mind, this is what keeps on pushing one to go ahead with the practice, to go deeper, to wanting to go deeper into the practice, right? That is 100% fueled by what? Experiential practice, experiential wisdom, right? This is all not Sammuti Satcha. This is Paramartha Satcha that we are talking about at this place, not Sammuti Satcha. Right? Sammuti Satcha is what we at this place should be now abandoning. Why? Because now we are not holding on to the cultural beliefs, traditions, or norms. We are now working with reality, present moment, experience, right? Experience. So it is not Sammuti, it is Paramatta. Sammuti is conceptual reality, Paramatta is ultimate reality. It is in this, remember, ultimate reality is what we work with in Vipassana, right? What is ultimate reality, right? Chitta, Chetasika, Rupa, Nibbana, right? You don't need anything, you don't need to say anything else. It's Chitta, Chetasika, Rupa, Nibbana. These things are ultimate reality. Why? They are indivisible. In its individual unit, you can't divide it more, right? Hence it is its ultimate form. However, these ultimate forms also arise and pass away, now in that realization, or prompting us to go deeper into that realization, is this zest, gladness, and following that is the tranquility of body, the tranquility of mind and body, the happiness. This is the gladness that one must have, right? This is the gladness that one must have. Now, during our meditations, after your individual practice, which I know most of you do every single day, make sure the moment you get up, it might have been a good meditation, or it might not been up to your standards, but if you're thinking in that way, you're still weak, right? But however, regardless, we have our good days and bad days. No? Be able to be aware and give yourself credit for that practice. Bring in a sense of gladness towards that practice that you're doing. That is going to motivate or keep motivating you to do more and better of it, right? More and better of it. If your children, if your family is very complimentary of the good things that you do, you might be a good cook, right? You might be able to clean very well, or you might be very good as a mother or a father. You might be very good at your job. if someone is complimentary of the skills that you possess, what do? You want to do better at it. You want to do more of that, right? You're very happy to sort of do it, right? When you're now, the same thing applies to giving yourself that credit, arousing that sense of gladness. Of course, that sense of gladness is different from this sense of gladness, right? Because this sense of gladness is almost instantaneous with the practice, right? However, to get to this stage, or something that we can learn from these stages, are what should we be, or how should we be supporting ourselves during this practice time, right? So don't get up from your meditation seat, oh, I'm glad that that's over. Although some Saturdays or Sundays I do see that face. Oh, I'm glad that this is over. Don't get up from meditation in that way. Make sure, have that sense of awareness, even if it was a tough meditation. Some meditation days are quite tough, especially with the changes in the temperature. Change when it's cold, meditating is a little bit difficult, but some meditating in the cold is easy, right? Now, for me personally, meditating in the cold is a little bit difficult, right? I prefer meditating in the heat, actually. If I'm sweating, that is my best sort of time for meditation. That is for me. Some people prefer otherwise, right? However, being able to, or having that awareness to give yourself that sense of gladness that you have already practiced your meditation or done your meditation, not in a sense of, oh, another day, or I've ticked or completed another day, but with a sense of I've done what should be done, if you understand what I mean, right? Because if our meditation again falls into a timetable structure, again it goes into dictate. It should be done because that is what should be done, not because that is what you should be doing, right? There is nothing as should be doing, right? In this practice, it is doing what should be done, right? In the sense of developing, cultivating that which is wholesome, right? That gives rise to gladness and, of course, tranquility of mind and body, right? And then arises, because of that tranquility of mind and body, there arises samadhi. Samadhi speaks about the jhanas, right? It speaks about the jhanic bliss that we are able to give rise to, right? Give rise to. This jhanic bliss, right, all the way up until, right, the places, those jhanas that do not have equanimity are all included within this part. All jhanas without equanimity, right, are included within this samadhi, right, within this samadhi. This samadhi is what, remember, during the moments of samadhi, one is able to, or it is a result, or it happens or arises as a result of, sorry for the sound. It happens as a result of the suppressed hindrances. When the hindrances are suppressed, the dhyana is able to now arise. Why? Because there are no disturbances to that focus, orientation, practice, or tranquility meditation that one is doing. In doing so, when you come out of the jhana, your mind is very sharp. Your mind is very sharp. And because your mind is sharp, you are able to go deeper into, or have penetrative wisdom through the scope or into the knowledges of the Four Noble Truths, into the knowledges of the Four Noble Truths, which allow for the attainment through Samma Ditthi. Yes, dear.
Sorry, Bhante, I don't know if I heard right or whether I'm understanding is wrong. You said, so there's jhanas that don't have one point. I thought all the jhanas have got one point in the first
Not
jhana.
ekagata, not ekagata, upekha.
Equanimity. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So all jhanas without equanimity, not ekagata. So this is because the dhyanas allow for the suppressing of the hindrances, which allow for penetrative wisdom towards to understand, not understand really, to see or to have that scope to see the factors or to see reality with, or anitya dukkha anatma, or upada titibanga, right? Arising, persisting, and passing away. This upada titibanga, the arising, persisting, and passing away, or anicca dukkha anatma, these are the factors or the points of focus when it comes to really seeing what reality is all about in that most definite sense. That is only possible for a mind that has been subdued, for a mind which does not go everywhere, for a mind that is able to observe and to keep that focus up until you are able to actually be aware and see. That then streams onto or leads onto upekka, equanimity. Equanimity is now the jhana experiences with equanimity, with upekka. This is, at this stage, the hindrances are, it is almost, some people even sort of think that they are enlightened at this stage. Why the hindrances are so well suppressed, right? The hindrances are so well suppressed. And because the hindrances are so well suppressed, one imagines that one has achieved enlightenment also in certain cases, or in certain cases. When now one reaches this state or this awakening factor of equanimity, now one has a very, very good penetrative aspect of wisdom where one is able to go deeper into these points. Earlier, what happened was, when you arrived at a conclusion, this conclusion was spoiled and rather tainted by tanha ditthimana, right? By the influxes. Even your wisdom was rather tainted by tanha ditthimana. Why? Because the hindrances are so closely knitted to our existence. The whole reason of our existence is the hindrances. Are the hindrances, the anusayas working. At this point, when we reach upekha, it suppresses the hindrances to such a profound state where now we are able to use that ability of focus to go deeper into vipassana without the mundane disturbances that one would experience. Yes, dear. That one would experience.
Bhante.
Right? Yes, dear.
When you say the reasons for existing, you say are the hindrances, are the influxes. So are we relating the hindrances, the nivarana, to be the same as the asava, the influxes, the asava?
They are all the same with different words. They are all the same with different words, but we explain this. But the thing is, we use different words. We've explained this. We use different words in certain places to relate to different functions of it. You know, like for example, we have so many words for raga, right? Or to sort of speak about the certain different functions that mind can create, right? However, here we are specifically referring to, of course, the influxes, but also the anusayas or even the prapanchas, we could say, because these are all sort of offsets of that same anusaya, Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Yeah. And so that is that, right? So those are the sapta bodhjangas. At one point, one bodhjanga leads to the arising of the other. At another point, the bodhjangas, when completed, all saturate together as well. That is a point to notice. At the beginning, the bodhjangas arise from one to the other, from the one to the other. But once completed, the bodhjangas then unanimously develop and cultivate together, right? Because at that point, when the hindrances are suppressed, then the bojjhangas, the sapta bojjhangas, now they all start to develop together, because it is like the parts of the Eightfold Noble Path, which again sort of flourishes and works together. But it is in the first part that we must realize that we have to have our foundations straight. We have to have our foundations correctly, and our foundations should not be, Dhamma should not be sort of made into or be going into something that we are, that we would claim, for example, being Sri Lankan or being Buddhist or something of that sort, which then there's a high propensity that we are now turning Dhamma again into a ditthi. Right? It is that same ditthi where now you meditate, we start hallucinating those sort of having those certain achievements or attainments. That hallucination is brought about again with those ditthis, right? Hallucinations are brought about with those ditthis. So that to break that, we must always go ahead with understanding, humble with that understanding, always analyzing and sort of seeing, are the roots right? What is the purpose in my actions? Sort of contemplating and having that awareness. When you get used to it, that awareness happens almost instantaneously. You don't even have to think about it. It happens so far because now you're used to that, right? Now you're used to that. It is that kind of, just imagine, that happens so much more faster when you are in a jhanic state, right? Because in the dhyanic state, when the hindrances have not or do not have a hold over your mind, right, to a great extent, it has been sort of suppressed. At that point, just imagine this wisdom just flowing from you. Each and everything that you have coming into the sensory bases are now seen through these elements of wisdom. Not to store anything, but to support the understanding, leading to the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, right? Because now we do not have an unwholesome agenda. Right now, we do have an unwholesome agenda. Unwholesome how? Unwholesome in a way of supporting our existence in samsara, right? Unwholesome in a way of supporting our existence in samsara. Now, with that said, now these, we can practice it now. Do we have any other questions? Any questions before we move on?
Yes, can I just ask?
Okay, please go ahead.
About tranquility, you said it was, you said it's to do with sort of tranquility of both body and mind. Did you mean the mental body and consciousness?
Gladness, zest is mind. Passaddhi is body.
Body meaning mental body or physical body?
This is the now the passaddhi which arises through the physical body, right? The physical body. The gladness, the earlier gladness is wholly on the mind, right? Now remember, Miri, remember the pervading tranquility. Dil, you can put your hand down. I know you want to have a question. The pervading sense of happiness. Remember, Mary, where the body starts shaking, the elbows, the shoulders going up and down, the tearing, the crying, the body floating, right? Now, those are experienced. Now, that again starts supporting for your practice to now go further. Why? Because of this peaceful, blissful sort of support that we receive, even through sort of in that way also supporting, keep on doing it in that kind of a sense. So it is referring to the tranquility of the body.
Okay,
right?
Because in the book, Bhante, because in the book it said, in our Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, they talked about tranquility.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this is referring to, this
That's
is referring to Sanyakanda, right? It is referring to the body of being. The body
yeah,
of
exactly.
being
Mental
is
body,
the
yeah.
Upadana-khanda. Or rather, not the Upadana-khanda. There we say it is a skanda. right?
Yeah.
So it is the skandha of being. So there, it is everything to do with the vinyana khandha, the sanya khandha, the sankhara khandha, right? So yes, it is the body of being. So the body of being here is the reasons for your existence, is the pancha upadana skandha, but at this state it is not known as the pancha upadana skandha, or the five aggregates of clinging. It is known as the five aggregates. So it is the five aggregates, the tranquility through the five aggregates that we experience here. Thank you, Miri.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
That thank you was a bit like doubtful. Miri,
No, fine, Bhante. Thank you. It's okay.
is it clear, Miri?
I think so. I'll read the book again.
So this is it. This is it. Let me tell you again, right? The kaya passaddhi is the tranquility that arises through the body, the physical, the mental body of being. Being, not being, but being, right? That being in the present moment kind of being, right? That being, now how are we being? How are we here? We are here because of the five aggregates of clinging.
Yes.
Right? But now, because we are focusing or talking about the Sapta Bodhanga, or the seven factors of enlightenment, we do not refer to it as the five aggregates of clinging. We refer to it just as the five aggregates. Right? So other than the Rupa Khandha, right? We take all the other aggregates, right? We take all the other aggregates except, right? We take all the other aggregates. That is the feeling, perception, volition activities, and sankhara khandha, right? But chitta passaddhi, right, is the calm of the mind. That is vinyana khandha, right? So chitta, right, is vinyana khandha. All right. Is that clear now?
Yes.
Right. So that is the body of being that we are referring to there. Right. In the earlier one, which is the gladness, right? That arises from the chetasikas.
Right.
The gladness arises from the chetasikas there. Right. So then the sun vinyana khandha sanya, and so then reducing all of that, we must take the rest for the other part of the body. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Dil?
Yeah. So I had another question, but best to follow on from Mihiri's. So it's interesting because in this particular instance, when we are referring to the Bojjhangas, so we have Piti and then we have Passaddhi. So these are very difficult because in English also, there we said that now in that way you explained to Mihiri, Piti was rest, and therefore it was from the Chetasikas and not due to the mind. And what you have, the way I understood, maybe I'm wrong, and that when you look at Passaddhi calm, it's really about the five aggregates. Those are the khandhas, right? But when you look at the jhanas, now
But remember that the Chetasikas are also part of the aggregates, Dil.
Bhante?
Remember the Chetasikas are also part of the aggregates.
Yes, but when you what you were explaining and saying is that was about the mind, the first part of it, which is the glad. Yes,
mind meaning the Chetasikas,
yes.
That part of the mind,
Yes.
and the Passaddhi was all the other parts of the mind except Chetasikas and Rupa Khandha.
Yes, so except for the Rupa Khandha, but then the first
except for Chetasika and Rupa Khandha.
So then what you're left with chittas, if you are removed, right? So you're left with so there are chittas, chetasikas, rupakanda, and there is nibbana. So you're referring to the other parts without those.
Vedana, Sanya, we have Vedana, Sanya, and Sankhara.
So no vijnana and no. Yeah. But now that is for the Bojjhangas. But we also came across Piti, Sukha and things when we are doing the jhanas. Now, in that case, that zest was called Piti, and that was really told. You always say it's like a mirage, and when you see, it's like when you. So that was more to be like the mind that you see the mirage
on its own.
Yeah, but then that sukha that comes in happiness sukha, that is when you actually drink the water and it's a more bodily thing. That's how
Well,
we are.
those are, well, yes, yes, of course, of
Yeah,
course. Those are ways that we would define the word,
yeah,
right? But in this classification of what parts it develops,
yeah.
then we have a difference or a definition to what we would actually develop at that moment. So, yes, so in that sense, we are talking of it in a different manner. And this says here, we are talking about it in a different manner, where it is now something, a supporting factor towards enlightenment.
Because that's why when we what we have read in the book is that now what you're reading now is this. The other thing, the question I had first, this was from Mihiri's question, was it's quite interesting because all these so far, all these suttas that we have been learning from you, we were always looking at in everything, in meditation, in everything, we look at the anicca dukkha, anicca dukkha. But it's interesting because this is the first time that we are stressing that actually what you're trying to realize is the Four Noble Truths. And then through that afterwards, when you get into that one pointer states and when you're going to econ, then you look at anicca dukkha anatta and the upaditi bhanga. But those days, if you look at every sutta we spoke about, it's about we are looking at anicca dukkha anatta and look at meditation, everything
Well,
that.
well, that is not quite true, is it? Because I mean, if we look at the Four Noble Truths, that is Anicca Dukkha Anatta, isn't it?
Yes, but when we are talking, we don't say that is dukkha dukkha samudayo nirodha, and we don't say marga. We are always looking at that. I know it is the same because it's changing because of the impermanent years. But when we are told to leave your load,
Yes.
then all these
That-
kinds of words which
yeah.
come are more towards that. But now it's very specific. Every time you are talking about in every phrase, look at the phone, look at the phone, and then from that through the one pointness, when you go to equanimity, now you are talking about the upaditi banga. So I find it very interesting, and that's why really when you go to read in English, you can get quite confused because these words, piti, sukha, gladness, happiness, these words get very confused. So in our minds, you can easily, go a bit astray if you are not very careful. I think English is not a good
Yeah.
language in that.
Also, I mean, when we talk about Passadhi, okay, thank you, Dil. That is it, no? All right. When we talk about Passadhi, we realize that in Passadhi, when we talk about tranquility and calm, this tranquility and calm, even in the face of the elements that are there in the world, right? And now I'm going to connect this to another sutta, but in a bit. But when we see the elements which is existent in the world, the the idea of tranquility or having tranquility and calm towards the different adversities that we experience in the world gives us an inert opportunity to see deeper into what really the world is. Now, for example, let us say uh, what uh, um, uh, you are this example of you're hammering a nail into the wall but accidentally hit your thumb, right? And when you're aware, you see that you feel a throbbing of the thumb and the pain, right? Sort of in waves almost. This wave is sort of like the rising and the passing in a way, or at least it feels like it, right? But that is only possible when you're a bit calm about it, isn't it? If a small child or a person who is who is sort of going to react to the pain is not going to see that. He's going to see one long stretch of pain, right? For the meditator who is not sort of taken aback by that pain, sees the throbbing, right? Now that is brought about, that is connected to this passaddhi and calm, right? Because when you realize at this point, now let us say someone, you have a bit of money at home, right? You have so much more money in your bank, right? The thieves come and steal that bit of money that you have, right? But you have, that money is not even 0.01 of what you have in the bank account, so you're not even bothered. You understand what I mean? You're not even bothered. The thieves have come and sort of plundered and stolen that bit of money you had at home or in your wallet or whatnot. But because you have so much more reserves in your bank, you're not sort of flustered, right? That is similar to what the Buddha is referring to in this state, right? Where this state of calm, tranquility, and calm, this sense of passaddhi, when it arises, you know what truly is important in a deep, profound sense of wisdom, with a deep, profound sense of wisdom. You are not taken aback, or you do not get excited with the worldly sort of with the worldly pettiness that, or the worldly occurrences that happen around us. That sense of calm and tranquility allows for a deeper, more profound understanding through insightful penetrative wisdom, right? Through insightful penetrative wisdom. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, because of that sense of, it's like, for example, you see, someone is having a fight, right? If you go and get involved in the fight, you are now involved, you cannot see the bigger picture. But if you are just sitting by the side and just observing the fight, you have a big picture now. You are very wise and you know what exactly to say or what not, because why? You're no longer involved, you're not involved in it, right? It is as if, uh, you are going through a problem. When you are going through a problem, you don't know what to do. But when another person is going through going through a problem, you are very wise, you know what to say, you know how to help the friend out. Why? That sense of tranquility that exists when you do not have that problem, when you are not emotionally attached into that problem, right? This is not to say that you are, this is not to sort of look at from a manya point of view. This is to look at from a tranquility and calmness sort of perspective of mind, right? Which allows that deep penetrative wisdom to arise. And in that arising, to understand or to have wise reflection, yoniso manasikara. Why? Because of that detached or unentangled perspective that one would have because of this calm tranquility, what we call passaddhi, which would arise with that practice, right? With that practice. This is very similar to the experience of death, right? When one is not sort of overtaken by the experience of death, or rather not frazzled by the dying process, one often, that is why in the Metta Sutta or the Mettani Sansa Sutta, the results of Metta, the Buddha says that one who develops Metta will never go or fall into the woeful realms. Why? Because that sense of Metta developed towards oneself allows one to have this stability and sort of um, unindulgent attitude, right, towards that experience of those connected to, or hatred connected to that experience of death, which allows a person to now not be flustered by that dying experience. And in not being flustered, one can now arise or be born in a better, more a human or a better plane, a divine plane, right? It is that element, this element of passaddhi, which even in similar circumstances helps in that moment where one is able to observe, right? Now, when you, in your meditation, because of that calmness that you have, this allows you to observe the breath when it arises and passes away. That arising and falling away of the breath can only be seen when you do not entangle yourself in the breath, right? That is again that passaddhi that we are speaking about. Not in this as an example, but not in this specific sense, but it's an example of what that passaddhi is. Do we understand? Right? Right? That is what we hear, what we speak about. Now, the Buddha, we remember the Buddha speaks about the Atalo Dhamma, right? Atalo Dhamma. Atalo Dhamma is, can someone remind?
The
Uh,
vicissitudes of life.
the 8 vicissitudes of life. Do you remember all the 8, Dil?
Yeah. Where it is pleasure and pain,
Yeah.
loss and gain.
Okay.
Then there is honor and dishonor,
Yeah.
and praise and blame.
Praise and blame. Wonderful. Right? The 8 vicissitudes of life. Now, the Buddha always says to not be frazzled, to not be sort of, to be, rather in a way unshakable by these sort of 8. right? Which will allow one to continue one's practice of mindfulness, to continue one's practice towards enlightenment. Because the moment that we are frazzled by it, we are now disturbed, our mindfulness is harmed. We now fall into unwholesome, because that frazzlement, or rather that disturbance, is not created by wisdom, it is created by hatred. Hatred for what? Hatred for that situation that we are in, right? Hatred for that situation that we are in. It is a very difficult thing. It is a very difficult thing. However, the Buddha, in certain techniques of meditation, such as Marananusati, Marnanusati, Chaganusati, Devanusati, Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati, Metta, Mudita, Karuna, Upekha, these techniques of meditation have been introduced by the Buddha to directly tackle these 8 vicissitudes of life. Meaning, not tackle in the sense not to get rid of that, but to give you the strength to face those. Right? In a way of creating that alertness, awakeness of mind to know this is going to happen. You know, this is going to happen. You, whether it is today, tomorrow, or 10 years in the future, this is going to happen. So in knowing that this is going to happen, to have that preparedness of mind to not be moved and shaken from your roots when it does finally happen. Right? That is what is prompted. That is what is prompted. That is what is prompted. Now, in the 6th factor of enlightenment, when it comes to samadhi, in samadhi, what the Buddha is directly relating to in terms of this samadhi, right, is where the mind is able to now achieve a state of jhanic bliss, or rather this state of freedom from the 5 hindrances, which leads to the intensity of attraction towards kama chanda, right? Towards kama chanda, vyapada, which is sensual desire, ill will, tina midda, which is sloth and torpor, uddhacca kukucca, restlessness and worry, and vichikicca, doubt. The attraction that we have towards these things. Now, one might say, what attraction? We don't have it. Yes, you do. It is because we are attracted to these things, or we work in this manner, or we are sort of very deeply connected emotionally to these sort of 5 parts, that we are all here. Right? In this attraction, the 5 hindrances, in this attraction, in samadhi arising, it cuts off this attraction that we have to these 5. Right? In cutting off the attraction that we have to this 5, we now have the ability to focus purely on enlightenment, undefiled by the views and the connections that we have to these 5. Right? To these 5. Now, that is the Saptabodhanga. Of course, we can go deeper. We can go deeper, and we will be going deeper in the future with other sutras, But because of, we are not done yet, because of the attraction that one would have towards these hindrances, right? The Buddha has spoken of, because of the attraction or the pull, almost like the gravitational pull of the earth, the pull that we have towards working and living by the conditions of these hindrances, the conditions of mind and body, which always keeps us connected to these hindrances, the Buddha speaks about the development of powers, right? The development of powers. Now, in the development of powers, now, these bases of power, in certain places, the basis of power, do we remember the basis of power?
Faith.
It's,
No, it's faith, Shraddha, Virya, Sati, Samadhi, Prajna.
Lovely, thank you. And do we remember, and that is 5, isn't it? Right? In certain places, these 5 are spoken as these five are spoken as,
The balas, they are raised up.
sorry?
They're called the balas. They are raised up. The indriyas are raised to become the balas.
Yeah.
Both sides.
All right. Thank you, dear. In certain instances, these same balas, right, the power of wisdom, is spoken of in the five sense way, which Miri gave us the names of, and then they're also spoken of in four ways, right? In four ways, right? Now, these powers are also translated as, right? Now, these are spoken of in 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 relation to conciliation, right? In relation to conciliation, right? Now, conciliation, now what are the four? The four is Panya Bala, Virya Bala, right? Anabhajja Bala, Sangha Bala, right? Which is the power of wisdom, the power of energy, the power of blamelessness, and the power of conciliation, right? The power of conciliation, right? Now remember that these four powers which are spoken of, these four powers which are spoken of, these are the powers that directly attack fear, right? These are the balas which directly attack fear. What are the types of fear? What are the types of fear that one has, right? According to the Buddha, there are five main types of fear, right? There are five main types of fear. The fear of livelihood, right? The fear of livelihood being the first. The second being the fear of disrepute, the fear of disrepute, right? The third is the fear of nervousness before an assembly, right? The fear before an assembly. The fourth is the fear of death, right? The fifth is the fear of a bad destiny or the fear of rebirth, right? Now, these fears arise when one does not have the support of these balas in their life. And with the support of, now, how does this relate? How does this relate? I'm sorry, I might take 5 minutes extra. Sorry for that. But how does this relate? When the four balas, these four powers of conciliation, remember this conciliation happens in two ways. One way of conciliation is the way that we are supported or our relationships are nurtured. That's the first. Why it is stated as the first, remember, is because all our lives, right? Everyone, me and you, monk and lay, all our lives, the stability that we have depends on the relationships or the quality of relationships that we have in our lives, right? That we have in our lives. All of you are able to commit this amount of time that you commit towards the Dhamma is because of the support that you have from the family or, the people that you live with, right? The people that you live with, right? Or you're very dominant. And when they say don't go, you're like, shut up, I'll hit you. Which is a joke. Right? It is because of the support that we have from, because or else, even if you do come, you will not be practicing. Right? So the latter does not work, where I told you, oh, shut up, I'll go to what I want to do. That will not work. Right? Why? Because the Dhamma will not flourish. The Buddha says it is when you have those powers of conciliation where your relationships are nurtured through this practice, and with that you feel that sense of support arising, that sense of support leading or helping you in the practice, that is when a person is truly able to flourish in the path of practice. In the path of practice. That being said, the second way that this conciliation happens, or everything is sort of held together, right? Held together is by bringing together the practice itself, forming a solid, or in this way we are referring to as a full sort of wholesome being, right? A full wholesome being, meaning a being who is supported in every way, not referring to the relationship, but referring to the aggregates or referring to the mind, right? Where now one has the capacity to now walk in the path of Dhamma. When this conciliation does not arise, when this conciliation is not present, right, then we face the bias that arise, the Buddha says, the bias that we have spoken of, the fears, right? How do we get rid of now, why I thought of connecting this and the Sabbāsava Sutta is when those ashravas have not been tamed, this is what happens. We are fearful, right? We are fearful. We are wondering, oh my gosh, where am I going to be reborn? What's going to happen to me? All of these things happen when the ashravas are not tamed. Remember that this is only a result of the ashravas. This is not a true reflection of reality. Because of that imputed nature of the ashravas, where I mentioned that it collapses your confidence in each and every way, because of that reason, now you have all these bias. Let's look at the bias first. The fear of livelihood, right? Now, the fear of livelihood refers to, of course, it refers to your livelihood. But this is not just, remember, this is not just the balanced livelihood which is spoken of. The balanced livelihood which is spoken of in the balanced livelihood which is spoken of in Samma Ajiva. This is spoken of, right? The Buddha says, with regard to this, there are 4 parts which needs to be fulfilled, right? To have a balanced livelihood, or this livelihood has to be supported by 4 parts. What are those 4 parts? The first is to be well qualified in the industry or the work that you do, right? You have to be well qualified in the industry or the work that you do. So, for example, if you're a doctor, you must be qualified to be a doctor, obviously, no? Right? You should be knowing what you should be doing, right? That is going to allow you to have or build that stability as a doctor. As a monk, the same thing, right? As a monk, it's the same thing. When you are qualified, when you are educated, when you know what you're doing, when you know what you're teaching, you will not be one of those insecure people who sort of, tries to sort of, do very unpleasant things to other people, right? To ensure your growth. You don't have to now cut down on the people. You just have to do what you do best. Do you understand? Right? So be qualified in what you do. The second thing is to be industrious in your work. Right? To be industrious in your work. The third is to be blameless in our actions. And the fourth is to be or to live in good terms with others. That is a reflection of wisdom, right? That is a reflection of wisdom. So in Pali, We could say panya, wisdom, energy, virya, blamelessness, and conciliation. Now, do you understand those four parts? Right? Those four parts need to be present in the Ajiva. The ability to have wisdom or to be qualified or to know what you are doing, to be industrious, to be active, to put in what you have to do each and every day into your work, to be blameless, to not do anything that can bring you blame, and then to be in good terms with others, to have those good relationships, those then support that right livelihood that we have, right? That right livelihood that we have. In the same way, the fear of disrepute, same we can apply wisdom, energy, blamelessness, and conciliation into the fear of disrepute. How? We apply wisdom, that is, right? That is the practical knowledge that brings out the best in everyone. Now, when you are a leader, right, you can tell you're not doing this right, you're not doing this right, you're not doing this, but that is not seen as good leadership. But if you are able to bring out the best in people, that is where you really get the best out of people, right? Get the best out of people, right? We apply wisdom, that is in a practical sense, to bring out the best in everyone, right? That is the wisdom part. Then the second, the industriousness, how the energy, how do we apply that? We are industrious now in our efforts. To do what is right and what is within our power. To do what is right within our power. Right now, that industrious nature is connected to wisdom also, you see. To do what is right, but to realize also what is within our power to do. Right? To be blameless in our actions, that is, we have done what is right and proper within our power. And then we are in good terms, we are willing to accept and forgive others when the time needs to be so. If that is so, now we know someone can do something really bad to us. However, at that position, when time comes, if you don't forgive them, when they apologize or whatnot, what happens is now they are not to blame, you are to blame for not forgiving, right? For not forgiving, to be blameless in our actions. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit extra time. Is that okay? You can leave and watch the recording if you like, if you have something else to run to, right? That when these four are finished, or I'm sorry, when these four are completed by way again of energy, wisdom, blamelessness, and conciliation, keeping everything together, what is he telling us? We cannot do this alone. You might meditate however long that you want to, but when you need to cook, you need to go to the market, the supermarket, and buy stuff. When something wrong happens, when you need your roof fixed, you need to call the repairman. When you need someone, you have to have your partner or your children to take you do whatever you want. We need the help of people. We need people in our lives, but not in a cunning way just to get what they want. We have wisdom, energy, blamelessness, and conciliation. We don't try to divide people, we try to work with people. Then we have the nervousness within the assembly of people, or in front of a group of people, right? Here, this is not having that fear of people or working with people, right? This is the first one, is learn what is useful for effective public speaking, or knowing what to say and being able to, having the wisdom to be able to say it whilst maintaining inner calm and bliss. Because the restlessness or the anxiety which often comes with public speaking or speaking in front of people is usually because of other reasons or other sort of factors which now where you arouse a sense of self-doubt, right? Arouse a sense of self-doubt. So now with this wisdom, you do not have that self-doubt anymore. The second one, right? The second one is being able to practice what you are going to say. Now, for the, it's quite surprising by how the Buddha sort of, talks about all of these things back in the day, right? Being able to practicing before or knowing what you're going to say before you actually say it, right? Before you actually say it. The third, right, is to have good intentions, to have good intentions in the speech behind the things that we speak, to not speak out of bad intention. And fourth is to address people with loving kindness, so that as a result of that speech, people are united. When we speak with loving kindness, it brings people together. It does not disperse them. It does not disperse them, right? In that way, we develop this sense of confidence in being able to be with people or a crowd of people. Then we have our most weighted point, the fear of death. In the fear of death, the first, how do we apply wisdom? Wisdom, wisdom, energy, virya, blamelessness, and conciliation in terms of dealing with the power of death. We, first, wisdom, learn about the nature of the mind and body. Learn about the nature of the mind and body, right? Living, knowing, or being able to live well as the best preparation for dying well. Living well is the best preparation for dying well. Living well is the best preparation for dying well. Second, make a regular effort into the cultivation of the mind, right? Make a regular effort into the cultivation of the mind. Third, lead a blameless life based on moral values, sila, right? Even towards plants and animals. Even towards plants and animals. Blamelessness in such kind of a way, right? And the fourth is cultivating loving kindness to all beings and phenomena, towards all beings and phenomena. Having that sense of loving kindness towards people who do you right and do you wrong, right? Not having that sense, difficult, but this is the Dhamma way, right? Difficult, but because of practicing in this manner, what the gift that this practice bears is great, and that is being able to die happily, being able to die without any sort of fear, being able to die and pass away without any form of doubt in where you're going to arise. In where you're going to arise. Then we have the fear of the bad destiny. How does wisdom arise? Or how can we put wisdom into practice with regards to this fear? Wisdom. We understand that the mind body we bear is impermanent, and as such it has no essence or soul. Hence we reject self-identity. It is because of the self-identity, Atma Sanya, that we fear the future destinies and enlightenment. It is, where am I going to go? But the thing is, you are not going to go anywhere. You're going to die with this body. And the energies, the genetical structure of your energies, yes, that is going to be reborn. So it's the same person or not? It's going to be a completely different person. But not completely different, part different, part same. But however, you will have no memory. of any of this here. So this self-view is what is going to keep us. It is in letting go, it is in thinking that we are this that keeps us from wanting to let go of all this, right? Wanting to let go of all of this. Second, how does virya come into play? Make every effort to lead a blameless life based on moral virtue, again, keeping of the precepts, right? Then the blamelessness comes in, virya comes in the 5 precepts, in the precepts. The blamelessness comes in cultivating breath meditation to purify and calm the mind, especially during the last moments. So for one to use, remember, for one to use mindfulness during last moments, you need to really believe in the power of meditation. Just as people start praying to the devas, people start praying to all the ammas, Kali Amma, everyone. When we are going to die, people start praying to all the ammas, right? But but who we really need to, or what we really need to have that conviction towards, or the dedication towards, is our practice, that mindfulness, right? That is why this sense of, we really need to practice it, people. We really need to practice it, right? Because, or else, forget about, or else, even thinking of meditation. When you're meditating, when you're sick, try meditating when you have a fever. Try meditating when you have a cold, a headache. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't be bothered, right? You can't be bothered. Meditate, get into it. Start loving it as a practice. Love it as much as you love junk food and your cookies and your cupcakes and your muffins. Right? You need to love it as if, your grandchildren and children bring you joy, just like Bhante Panyavansa brings you joy. Right? You have to develop that sense of connection with your meditation, right? With your meditation, where now you are able to use it in that sense during that time. Then the fourth is readily forgive people. Go behind people to forgive people. Don't be carrying other people's garbage, right? Or your garbage. Don't carry any garbage, right? Be willing and very open to forgive. I know, again, very difficult. Very, very difficult. However, this is going to make our journeys lighter. This is going to make our journeys lighter. Because remember, this forgiveness was repeated. Why? Because love always overcomes fear. It is because love overcomes fear that in the Sabbāsava Sutta, people or beings who have metta do not go to hell. That is why, because love overcomes fear, right? Even the love, now I know that some of you believe or do not believe in radiating metta towards yourself at first. When we start our metta practice, some of you, I know you do not believe in radiating this metta towards yourself. But remember, the only reason that you think that is wrong is because you're taking this as self. Don't take this as self, right? If you take away that element of self here, know this like your supporting aid in this path. Now you have metta towards this, because you have to have metta towards yourself. Because we make mistakes, we do blunders, we hate, we have lust, we are delusional sometimes. You have to have metta towards yourself. You have to have metta towards yourself, which allows you to now be able to now look over and even forgive yourself and forgive other people who do this self wrong, right? Who do this self wrong. Now, in having these 4 parts, in having these 4 different parts, wisdom, in having the wisdom, energy, blamelessness, and conciliation in these 4 ways regarding all these bias that arise, right? Bias that arise is going to give you the ability to now work against it. But there is also a way of directly working, 6 ways of directly working against this, right? Right? 6 ways of directly working against this. The first is metta kaya kamma. Metta kaya kamma. Maintain bodily acts of loving kindness. Metta vachi kamma. Bodily, verbal acts of loving kindness. Metta mano kamma. Mental actions of loving kindness. Sadharana bhogi, that is enjoying things in common with the virtuous, right? Sharing in things, sharing dhamma, sharing what you have, being ready to share. That is, remember, that is a very important, that is, without this part, your metta is limited. Without this part, your metta is limited. Your metta even becomes superficial. Because you mentally wish for people to be well, but when it comes for you to do something which reduces your wealth or which eats up your time for someone else's wellness, now you're not willing to do it, but in the mind you're prepared, right? This is where the Buddha says, sadharana bhogi, share what you have. This can be time, this can be wealth, this can be the help that you have in your life, being readily available or willing to share what you have with the virtuous, right? With the virtuous, right? And then we have sila samanatmata, right? Which is dwelling with those people who have common virtues, dealing with people who have common virtues conducive to mental concentration, right? Sila samanatmata leads to your mind becoming purer, your mind becoming, having that state of mental freedom, mental concentration, samadhi. And then we have dwell with common right view, ditti samanatmata, dwelling with people who share in similar values, right? In similar values. Now, if you're saying anicca dukkha anatma, someone else in the house is saying nitya sukha atma, you're going to be fighting all the time, right? You're going to be fighting all the time, right? You're going to not be able to accept that person in that sense, right? There are going to be differences, changes in views, and it is going to affect your practice. Now, we can discuss this more because however, this is speaking about, not developing, because that sense of bias is developed or cultivated when we have that doubt, self-doubt, and that doubt can arise when your view or these right views are not that which you sort of, if you do not see the rightness of the right views, right? If you have a doubt in the Four Noble Truths, which can be brought about by people who are of a different level, right? We can discuss that later. So in practicing these six, the Buddha says, you can get rid of the bias that one has towards our jiva, the livelihood, disrepute, the nervousness in front of an assembly of people, the fear of death, and the fear of destiny, right? And the fear of destiny. So this is the ashram, even in the Sabbāsava Sutta. Even in the Sabbāsava Sutta, this is what we hold on. Give me a moment, please. This is what we speak about in the Sabbāsava Sutta when we lack when we lack that development, when we lack that sort of development of mind, what happens is this leads to these bias which arise, right? In that case, what we must then do is then develop these 6. But remember, these 6 should be developing, you should be developing these 6 anyways from the beginning of your practice, right? Beginning of your practice, this having this sense of loving kindness, metta, in all aspects and attributes of your life, right? In all aspects and attributes of your life. All right. So I've taken a lot of your time. Do we have any questions?
Okay.
Yes.
Bhante?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
I got a bit confused about the powers you mentioned,
Yeah.
because the powers I'm familiar with, the Panchabala, Saddha,
Yeah.
Virya, Sati, Samadhi, Panya. And then you talked about 4 powers.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it in the sutta?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah. So what you have read today, is it in the sutta?
Same,
Both of them are in the suttas. Both of them are in the suttas, right? Now, with regards to the 4 factors are spoken of as those factors of conciliation, right? The 5 factors, or the fivefold way of the balas are spoken of specifically with regards to the meditation.
Okay.
Right? Specifically to the meditation, right? The 5 balas, there is the sutta, the 4 balas are spoken of in the Bala Sutta, right? There is 2 sutras in the Bala Sutta, which is the Sangaha Bala Sutta and the Panya Bala Sutta, right? The Sangaha Bala Sutta and the Panya Bala Sutta, both of them discuss the 4 factors, the balas in terms of the 4 factors. But this is all referring to similar aspects, but in the 5-fold mala, this is specific to the meditation.
Right, okay.
Right, this is specific to the meditation, right? Yes.
Yeah, just one more from that. See, when we do this new one, that the 4 factors, what is now, we know that Panna, we know it's Panya, we know Virya, but this power of blamelessness and the power of conciliation, what are the words for those? We don't know. Because we know those 5, we know Saddha, Virya, Sati, Samadhi, Panya, those 5 we know. What?
Okay, blamelessness is Anavajja.
Anavajja. Right?
Anabhajja, Anabajja,
right?
and conciliation is Sangaha, Sangha.
Sangha. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
So those are called the 4 factors of conciliation, the 4 factors of Sangha.
Yeah, the 4 factors. Remember that the fivefold manner is referring directly to the attainment of the supramundane, right? The 4-fold manner is referring to conciliation within the mundane, which leads to stability within the supramundane. Right? Which leads to stability within the supramundane. Right? If you go to the Panya Bala Sutta, you will find it. Okay? And okay, so I think I've taken enough time, right? Thank you very much. This extra teaching at the end is so wonderful, Sadhu. Okay. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. I will see you on Saturday. Right? Take care and be safe.
Bhante, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.